Good morning again, and thank you for joining the finale of your 2023 Extreme Tech Challenge Bootcamp. Our focus this week has been on investments, corporate collaborations, as well as market and brand positioning. And now we're going to wrap that up with a panel discussion with three splendid and successful alumni of Extreme Tech Challenge who really demonstrate the global scale and business scope of our program. So again, I'm John Martin, and I work on our ecosystem, staying in touch with as many of those alumni as possible. So I'm delighted to introduce three great businesses today. First, originally from Africa, but now a truly intercontinental man, we have Fela Buyi, founder of SALUBATA. SALUBATA was a 2021 XTC.Global finalist in the clean tech domain, but it's a recycling play that is also a fashion play. SALUBATA sells shoes made from recycled plastic, but not like heavy Crocs, rather stylish athletic shoes that look like they're made from fabric, but that fabric is actually the recycled plastic, and with the unique feature of modular uppers, on the idea of owning instead of owning dozens of full shoes, you only need one sole and tread. You can swap out the uppers and replace the sole. Next, from North America, we have Julian McCrea, founder of Open Sesame Media and their Sync Stage product. Open Sesame was a top 8 finalist in the 2022 Harman Startup Challenge presented by XTC. Sync Stage is classic IT software that nearly eliminates latency in audio streaming so that we can do, as they showed in a recent demo, have 3 people jamming on guitars to make some sweet music, but one of them is in America, one of them is in Canada, and one of them is Britain, and the latency is below that detectable by our brains. It's not only fun, but tremendous social mobility payoffs on enabling creatives in remote locations or lonely outliers of a style or genre can find their tribe and collaborate over the cloud, where previously they would be isolated and unfulfilled. And finally, from Europe, Alexander Piutti, founder of SPRK.Global, which was XTC's 2020 global winner in the sustainable cities domain. Alexander can fill in the details, but basically SPRK is a B2B service that optimizes food logistics in major metropolitan regions. Basically, some groceries and hotels may have too many tomatoes or avocados, yet be receiving more quote unquote automatic deliveries, while across town they're short on food supplies. SPRK can redirect trucks on the fly and reroute them to balance supplies, which you think would be simple, but apparently was not possible before. And doing that apparently saves boatloads of food waste and trashing. So you have 3 continents, 3 cohorts, 3 very different domains, all highly successful XTC startups with strong growth and active in capital markets. Open Sesame and SALUBATA are currently at various stages of fundraising. SPRK, the oldest among the 3, just completed that milestone a few months ago at the start of this year with the closing of a €6 million first round. And I think the others should probably have similar good news by the end of this year. So welcome to our 3 founders. Just want to check. Yep, it's recording. Welcome to our 3 founders, and please jump in to correct any of my descriptions before we get started with questions.
Yeah, Sean, we actually just closed our bridge round. So
well,
yeah. Maybe that
congratulations. We'll hear about that soon.
So, awesome. Nice to hear.
Anything else, Fela or Alexander, that you would like to expand?
Yeah, so like we are actually extending our round. So as you correctly mentioned, like we raised 6 million recently, but given strong feedback and interest from capital markets, we kept the round open, and so we are allowed to raise another 3-4 as part of the current round, which is our Series A.
Okay. Anything on the product or service I didn't complete?
The RP conference.
Oh, Fela, are you on there? Oh, there we are.
Yes, I am. For us, well, we're still in the process of fundraising. We're raising 3 million, and this will be in about 2 months. We currently have some investors jumping in, and we are currently trying to round off most of it by the coming month. So there is not so much update right now. Yeah.
No, I meant also on, so I'm going to run through roughly the sequence of your growth and success. So my first inquiry is about what Dennis Liu focused on yesterday, understanding the customer, gaining insight into what really is the problem. And I also asked why you were particularly drawn to this problem among so many. So let me start with Fela, if that's okay. I'm not sure that people were particularly clamoring for modular plastic shoes.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what led you to see that there was a demand there that people would actually pay for.
Okay, thank you so much. So earlier on, we've been making shoes from other materials like leather, and while I was working as an environmental scientist, I was also producing shoes by the side. I used to be a designer, and at that point, while I was working as an environmental scientist, we had some issues with containing PET plastics, like these kind of bottles. And so, and I always known that the problem with this plastic waste is in their volume. And we thought about if we could reduce the volume and we could reduce the waste. So at that point, we started thinking, what if we convert this plastic waste into shoes? And we thought that was a novel concept until we started making our research. We realized that we had the likes of Adidas, Rotis in the US, and some other brands that are making shoes from plastics. And so for us, it was market validation for the fact that people actually wear shoes made from plastics. And so we thought about what we could do much more differently. And so it was the reason we started thinking about how to make the shoes more fashionable. And so at SALUBATA right now, we really infusing a lot of customer support. And so we are even following the customer from the very first time they purchase the shoes till when they store it, till when they expose it, to the end of life of the shoes. And these are the things so many brands do not infuse in the lifetime of the customer itself. So a lot of these things are what we're putting into place. And so for us, it was just really about how can we get more people to wear more shoes from plastics? And so, and then we thought about this concept of modularity. And we tried with a few customers and realized that people really liked it. In fact, what we saw was that there is a ranking of modularity above circularity. And so we thought, that's not a bad idea. If these shoes are fashionable, let people buy them. We can educate them as they progress. And so this is what we offer. And so the people feel like these shoes are magical. I can really do a lot of magic with these shoes and without really sacrificing style. And so for us, we saw scale at that point where people were demanding more for the modularity. And for us, we're also embedding the education side of it. And so for us, we saw our customer base growing and the interest also growing. And with that, the move was also very strategic to even start making shoes from plastics, because the plastic plague as a whole is a global problem. And so it's everywhere. And so we thought about how we could make an impact that could be scalable, that could be impactful, that could be localized anywhere in the world. And so that's how we came up with this concept of modular shoes from plastics. I'm going to end it for now. Thank you.
Well, great. And we'll come back to some of those points later. Let me turn to Alexander. I know Berlin to be a comfortable and well-fed city with many seemingly prosperous grocers. What made you think that there was a problem that anyone would pay a premium to solve?
Well, so to share a little bit of my background, so I've been building marketplaces for the last 20 years. Basically, that's my profession. It's my toolbox. So anything between supply and demand, two-sided, three-sided, four-sided marketplaces. You know, I think Airbnb or Amazon, like B2B, if not B2B2C concepts, or supply chain concepts. So that's my background. And when I stumbled across the food waste problem, this is 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I was like, why is there no secondary market for overstock, right? You know, and these, you know, secondary markets exist in any industry like eBay or Rebuy. You know, they're all secondary markets. And people said, like, what the heck are you talking about, right? Like, it's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, you know, secondary markets do exist. Where's the one for food oversupply, right? And people said, like, there's none, right? There's no secondary market. There's no primary market. There's no platform for food B2B, believe it or not, globally, yeah? And that's part of our name. So SPRK.Global indicates, it's a global problem, food waste, 2.5 billion tons of food waste every single year, which is crazy. And of course, we're not global yet, but like we want to offer a global solution, to crack a global problem. And our starting point is Berlin. I could have started the company in Tel Aviv or Silicon Valley or even in London. I've lived all over, but I chose Germany because Germany, and I was born and raised in Germany, but Germany is quite conservative. It's bureaucratic, right? So like, if we crack that problem in Germany, it's probably easier to take it to some other regions. Yeah, so it's our blueprint that, evolved in Berlin, but it's not just a Berlin concept, obviously. Yeah, so like how we started is to identify players in the supply chain who have oversupply in an ongoing fashion, not just once, right? And we focus on the ones like at the beginning of the supply chain, like production, agriculture, food imports, the big players, basically, yeah? And the takeaway is like the further you move upstream in the supply chain, the bigger the food waste cases, yeah? Or the further you move towards the end of the supply chain, which is like a supermarket, it's very long tailing. A supermarket has like 2 yogurts or 3 cucumbers, like 4 tomatoes as oversupply, which is not a business case. Yeah. So I was like, what if we can start at the source of the supply chain, i.e. production? Yeah. Monster food waste cases, 30 tons of mango. Yeah. What to do with that? Yeah. And I call it the short tail. Yeah. Short tail is like, the big incumbents, the big global brands, production companies. Now, if the global brands accept to work with us, basically, we have a lot of impact from day one, as opposed to starting at supermarkets, long tail, like lots of products and no business case. Yeah. And so, yes, you're right to point out, like we started in Berlin, but basically we solve suppliers 2 problems. Number one, if we take over best edible foods, yeah, overstock, we save them disposal costs and we give them revenue. It's a revenue share, because if we find somebody who's paying for that, like we can share that revenue and bring it back as a revenue share while avoiding disposal costs. So we're adding margin, which is terribly important for these guys. Yeah. On the demand side, consumers or like, canteens, anybody producing food, we save them sourcing costs, yeah, because they can source through us and save money, which is a big, big topic today.
Okay. And now, Julian, there's latency everywhere in the world, but people aren't always necessarily willing to pay for that, and particularly the kind of audio latency you're looking for or looking at. Again, what insight suggested that was a market you could monetize?
Yeah, it's well, good to see you, John. What an amazing group. So I think in our case, it probably came about a little bit by accident. I think the best metaphor I give to people is like, like you made Amazon.com the bookstore, but in order to pull that off, you needed to do AWS, and AWS gets spun out as the behemoth. A very similar thing happened to us. We started the business really excited by the idea of social audio. So the idea that Alexas had just come out, we thought that was really interesting as a new form of entertainment device, new form of interface that was more naturalistic. We had a background in entertainment. We were looking at it going, but it really needs, humans are about groups. It's about us coming together. It's not about us talking to a machine. So we started to build experiences where humans would come together. We've been doing this since we're in Hasli tribes, right? And it's fundamentally how we've evolved as a species. So we did an application to try that out, which was a singing together application called World Karaoke. But when we were doing that, in order to sing together, you would need to do it in less than about 66 milliseconds. Right now on this video call, we're doing about 300 to 500 milliseconds. That's fine for voice, but it isn't fine if you're trying to do music or if you're trying to do anything in gaming and have an edge or in the metaverse space. So once that was a really, really hard problem to solve. We were really pushing the boundaries of what technology could do. There was a lot of promises around what networks can do. And if you look at the evolution of networks from 3G to 4G to 5G, they've always promised lower and lower latency. And then, yeah, we got there. And then what happened was when we built that AWS layer called Sync Stage, we ended up finding out that there was a ton of people who needed that. And really what they're paying for is when milliseconds matter. So in gaming or in broadcast or in certain verticals where you need to have an edge or you need to be able to make a decision, what we supply to them solves that problem. You know, Discord isn't fast enough. And then in other use cases where you're trying to have group experiences, yeah, we solve that ability, whether that's music and metaverse capabilities. So I think the best thing I can say to everyone in the audience is we really follow an old PBS series called Connections, which looks at the idea that any innovation that was created, no one knew exactly what people would do with it. And a good metaphor for you is you create the iPhone, but you don't know that actually because it's got an accelerometer and Uber is created along with GPS, right? Accelerator plus GPS equals that. And I think we are definitely in that mindset. You've seen that throughout kind of human history as well. So yes, milliseconds matter, and if they do, you pay us. So.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And also, as with SALUBATA, you were sort of more interested in plastics, but it turned out modularity was what people keyed into more. So then I want to take the next step up to getting that minimum viable product. And I'm going to come back to Alexander to start this. It's a great vision about food waste, but it strikes me, and I may have this wrong, that the way your thing works is basically on network effects. So it's the sort of thing that can be nothing until it's everything. And it's very hard to get a network effect rolling. Tell us a little bit about how you got those first couple of suppliers or stores and then were able to roll that up into a bigger network.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, it's a great question, because when you, let's say when you start an e-commerce business, right? Like it's a bit more, it's a bit easier, and because like you have a single brand, you have a single audience, and you know, you go downstream towards, you know, the audience you're selling something, right? Marketplaces is one up because you don't have a single brand, you have multiple brands, if not all the brands. Yeah, like Airbnb, you have like everyone, you know, renting out apartments in Mallorca, for example. Yeah, so like you need a complete offering, right? So when you start a marketplace, to go from zero to a complete offering, it's quite difficult. Yeah, when you think about the food supply chain, which is our case, I was like, well, how can I avoid, you know, having to offer, you know, a complete offering day one? Yeah, and also like, where do you start? When you start a marketplace concept, and you look at the food supply chain, do I start with retailers? Do I start with wholesalers? Do I start production companies, logistics? Yeah, it's like, it's really complex. Yeah, so where do you focus on day one? Yeah. Now, when they scale, when they take off, and we know, like, you know, even Google is a marketplace, if you like, yeah, you know, it's exponential, yeah. But to get to that point, you know, which takes you 2, 3, 4 years, and anything can break in the meantime. Basically, it's really complex. So what I did is, as I mentioned, I started 7, 8 years ago. I started a small company first, which sounds crazy. It was my go-to-market company, if you like. It's still around. It's a B2C company, to see if I can break into the supply chain, if I'm able to strike relationships, if I'm able to build trust before I inject technology. Yeah, so technology, yes, will be the edge in the long run, because it's AI driven and so on, but it's not technology first. Yeah, so first I try to validate assumption. It took me 3 years to prepare for this company, and I funded myself. I was, you know, my own angel and so on. Yeah, but you know, afterwards I was like, well, you know, assumptions are right, you know, and people are willing to accept our service, and I'm starting actually. But as a serial entrepreneur, you know, I've been starting companies for the last 20 years. I benefited from my network. Yeah, as a young founder, you know, to be honest, I wouldn't have been brave enough to say like, well, that's a bold mission, let's go. Yeah, but you know, knowing investors and knowing supply chain participants and still I had to like, you know, find new ways, yeah, because like SPRK.Global, as nobody else on this planet doing like what we do, yeah. So I can't point to somebody, for example, in the US and say that's the market leader in the US, and we kind of do it in a similar fashion in Europe, yeah. It's like, give me money, please, investor. So like there was nobody out there, and people said like, no, it sounds really simple what you guys do, but why is no one doing it? I was like, well, it's complex, right? But you know, talking about network effects, it took me 3 years to like prepare for this company, yeah, and I was lucky I was able to do so. And then COVID kicked in, and Ukraine kicked in, which gave us, you know, support because people needed our service. But yeah, it's complex, and you know, but I also learned, like, because I went to business school in the US, I went to Wharton, and you know, people at Wharton tell you think big. And here was, you know, the German conservative engineer was like, okay, think big. So that was my takeaway. So like, you know, we think big.
Okay. Fela, let me turn to you. You sort of touched on this. Maybe we'll drill in a little deeper on the modularity, but just in general, the world is just awash in shoes. It's such a crowded and noisy market. How did a complete unknown in the shoe space break into and develop the traction and the popularity that you have? I think you touched on the modularity and also on the social, but tell us that story, how you sold your first shoe and then the first 100.
All right, yeah, thanks a lot. First, I must start with our mission. And we didn't start with this mission anyway. But over time, we grew into it, and we felt like, okay, this is something we can stand for. And it's the mission of inventing lifestyle technologies that help people and the planet. And so these shoes happen to be one of part of our mission. And earlier, it was just really about trying to make money. But then we were not even making the money. So we just started making the money when we realized our mission. Okay, this is what we want to do. This is the niche we want to occupy. This is how we want to stand out. And so I've also tried to do some other things earlier, but they never worked. And so I would always say that I think founders should focus on their domain expertise and grow from there. And so we realized that, so right now it's the era of sustainability, climate tech, clean energy. And so you see people with zero domain expertise in those fields, because you see that is growing fast and they jump into it. And most times, at times, I mean, the initial part might work, over time it's not sustainable. And so for me personally, I decided to go into, okay, I used to work as an environmental scientist. I graduated at the best in my class at both my master's and bachelor's, and I'm just trying to see how best I can make this world a better place. And so sincerely, all of these things just kept happening. And I would also say that I think people should start with what they have. And when you start with what you have, I think your domain expertise should be added onto that. And that would create something unique. And so for me, the way I also think about my things are also very, very unique. And there is also a portion in the Bible that says, we give you as far as your eyes can see. So for me, it's really about, yes, we no longer live in an internet age. And so we no longer see humans as barriers to our growth. And so we thought about, so we made our research about, okay, this is where the world is tending to. And we have this domain expertise in this field. Why can't it be something unique in this field that everybody anywhere in the world can cherish? And so we started making shoes from some other materials earlier, and realized that people no longer really have interest in those things. And it was then we started thinking about how we could make those modular shoes. And when we made these modular shoes, we saw people get interested. They were so amazed about it. And we thought about, okay, this is getting interesting. And so additionally, we also are in strategic markets. And for example, we came to France, for example, because we realized that in France, I mean, in the EU, there's an education around sustainability already. And so we said, okay, I go in the metro. The first time I go into the metro, felt like I saw everybody wearing sneakers. I said, well, yeah, this is a flurry of sneakers in these people's streets, but this is a huge market also, because I believe we can sell our story better here. Additionally, we're also activating a brand in Los Angeles in the US. And so because we are part of Techstars, it was really very strategic to also join that community. We intentionally joined these guys so we could engage with the footwear community there. And we have a lot of celebrity, a lot of famous people around there that can really talk about what we're building. And so all of our moves are intentional, and initially they were not. But as we defined our mission, things started growing, and we saw people. So a lot of the shoes we've sold over time have been via referral. Like, I like what you're wearing, where did you get that? And so it's been via word of mouth. Overall, our cost of acquisition has actually gone down over time. And although we also understand that that might not really sustain us as we grow, we also need to invest some money in marketing and a lot of branding. And so, but then for us, it's the initial sales were around word of mouth. People liked what we're doing, and people kept talking about it. And for us too, we didn't see this as a small thing. We saw it as a big deal. We believe that we can conquer the world with our unique shoes. And so this is the reason we decided to occupy this niche. And that's why we are where we are now. And we also believe that this is not really about the shoes we're building. In fact, right now we are building technologies that have gone beyond shoes to carbon decomposition technologies. We're looking at technologies that could impact industries, businesses. In fact, we're growing from B2C to B2B to B2G. B2G in the sense that we could readily be part of regulations of many economies. And we believe with that, we can even make more impact. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I want to come back to the scale up thing. So Julian, groceries and shoes are a little more understandable, but latency APIs is a very deep geek thing, and that and more of a B2B that can sometimes be hard to get traction in such a deep tech space. How did you get to your first sales and traction with SyncStage?
Yeah, it's a great question, and really amazing to hear how the other guys' journeys as well. I think we're so deep in this that it's always amazing to hear how other people have got there. Okay, so for us, I'll talk about how we did it with investors, and then we'll talk about customers, right? So with investors, I would say I had to make it relatable. So it's like, have you ever been on a video call, someone's about to say something really important, and then it goes, and then it starts back up again?
Oh, yeah.
So that's called delay. And so because everyone had felt and had been on something like that, they understood that A, that was annoying, and B, they wanted to, do something different. So that was more on the investor side. To help them understand that that's an annoying problem, like a relatable problem. On the customer side, it depended, because we've got different customers in different markets, the people in music just get it. Like they understand the pain point because they had to deal with it over COVID. And they know the pain of trying to collaborate. So that was actually quite easy. In gaming, they already spend money on a NVIDIA GPU graphics card, a giant refresh screen, the best peripheries that they've got. Well, why don't you spend the money on your audio? It's like it's if you're trying to win, it's an easy thing. If you talk about that, you can give them an edge. That's why they buy all the other stuff. They're buying it so that they can win. And so you're giving them a better competitive advantage. So I'd say to you, the key benefits of latency are speed and synchronicity. Synchronicity was understood by the music market, and then speed was understood by like the gaming and the broadcast market. So yeah.
Okay. So now let me reverse this. Having gotten some initial traction, then there's the exponential scaling. And let me start with Alex in this case. You had mentioned that it's a long slog, which I gathered to get into the chain and build trust and get a few folks using this. Now I think you've scaled up more dramatically. You've got other players like hotels and so forth involved. Tell us a little bit about SPRK's scale-up story in the last couple of years.
Yeah. So let's say up until we won XTC in 2020, we were operating under the radar, because we're still checking assumptions, validating assumptions, doing all the prep work, you know, building a prototype and so on. Yeah? So like nobody knew us, yeah, even in Germany. And then we won XTC, and you know, we had a ton of visibility immediately, yeah, which was great. Okay, now we're public, I guess, yeah. And still, we, as you said, we focused on, when it comes to suppliers, to onboard suppliers one by one, yeah, because fortunately, as I said, we were able to operate or collaborate with the big ones from day one, yeah, as opposed to the long tail. So we did this one by one by one, and like a big supplier gives us, to give you an indication, 30, 40 tons per week, every single week. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Yeah, and each and every operator or supplier has his or her own use case, yeah, which cannot be easily replicated. Yeah, so like we had to find folks on the demand side and split, you know, the supply and say, you know, a third goes to hospitals, a third goes to food processing companies, a third goes to NGOs, yeah, to learn about, you know, the patterns. But, you know, the beauty is when it comes to food and the supply chain, it's almost like a river, right? It flows always. It always flows, you know, it's like going through the pipeline, the supply chain. So, you know, if you connect to the supply chain and you don't make any mistakes, basically you're in. Yeah. So lead generation from a lead generation point of view is, I'm not saying easy. It took me 2-3 years to build the relationships, but you know, once you're in, basically, like you're part of this flow, yeah, and you can replicate and you see patterns which you can automate, which is beautiful. Yeah, platform stuff. And now, this year, we've come to the stage where we can, you know, onboard dozens of players at the same time. Yeah, so that, but we needed that time to, like, you know, understand patterns and get the data right, and you know, do the matchmaking on the demand side. You know, build a multi-channel on the demand side, like a multi-sided marketplace, basically. So it took us, but from a technology point of view, it's interesting because we need to be able to differentiate audiences and price. Yeah. So if you look at eBay, for example, you log in, I log in, we see exactly the same, right? Or even Airbnb. Yeah. So, you know, there's no audience differentiation. In food, that doesn't work. Yeah. But because if I put, you know, 30 tons of mangoes from a certain supplier onto eBay and say, this is like what, you know, somebody's doing, you know, that would be a scandal, right? So it needs to be curated. Yeah. And so we're taking, from a technology point of view, the platform business to a new level and say, like, you know, it's not public, it's not like one fits all, it's like for every possible audience at a given price. It's like, you know, it varies, it needs to vary. And some things are public, yeah, but the really, you know, let's say questionable supply, which is ongoing, you know, it needs to be moderated or curated in a non-public fashion to crack food waste. Yeah. And so you can already tell, like, you know, like we spend a lot of time thinking, how do we, you know, build our roadmap and how do we set milestones? It's a bold vision, but we have to break it down. It needs to be manageable, achievable for everyone. That took us 4 years.
Okay, and we'll come back further on that. Let me move to Fela. I'd like to hear your scale-up story. I know, and you wrote me that you're certainly not local anymore. You've moved your manufacturing in several places. You incorporated in America. You're in Europe right now. Tell us what your strategy and tactics have been for, and also you do a lot on social, which you mentioned earlier. Tell us a little bit about your scale-up strategy for SALUBATA.
All right, thanks a lot. So I would say that it actually started with a dream of what we wanted to attain, and believe that for everything we are building, we can be the best in the world. And so how do we position for that? How do we appeal to those customers? How do we reach more markets? And so if you follow us really well, for at every point where we are invited for maybe a seminar, webinar, or a meeting, we're always talking about our next innovation. And so people are always looking at, okay, we're going to keep tabs. We do what we say. And so people keep watching, they keep watching. And so for us, we intentionally moved manufacturing to Portugal. And for us, it was really, and we tried some other instances, like producing in China and India. And we realized we considered so many things around appeal, around the carbon footprint of the product and all. And so we really want to be intentional about what we're doing. Additionally, the price point of our shoes are even way more expensive than the initial, because the wages are also higher and the materials are higher, more expensive, and so many other things. And so for us, it was really about, okay, we need to move manufacturing to Portugal. And this will appeal to the Europeans that, okay, this is made in the EU. I like this, I'll buy it as long as it's made in the EU. Americans, they like the fact that, okay, the shoes are made in EU, they have good quality. And so, in fact, our pricing now is in dollars. Europeans also would feel like I'm buying in dollars, so it means I'm paying less. And Americans can readily buy in dollars. If they buy in euros, they feel like they're paying more. And so it's all of this are really embedded in our pricing and every other part. Additionally, we've got some retail requests and wholesale requests. And so what we realized was that we saw so many people. So traditionally, a lot of businesses, the way they operate is the wholesaler are like the major determinant of the pricing which they make. And so for us, we felt like this doesn't really make sense for us to grow this business. Otherwise, we will never grow as fast as we can. And so, or as fast as we should. Anyway, so, but then we took another round and we talked about what if we start licensing our IP, because now we filed 2 global patents on our innovation. And so what if we license our innovation to people? And what if we what if we don't produce all the shoes in the world? What if we license, what if we white label our brand or our IP to other brands? Or that so many, for example, we're currently speaking to some other major brands around the world now. And so for us, it's a better, faster way to grow. And for us, we also make more impact. And so those are the strategies we're also trying to infuse in place. And we believe with this has really helped us to really moved and scaled our story. Also for the customer really like what we're doing. They like the fact that we are constantly innovating. And for example, now, the current phase where we are now, it seems like something that is totally unnecessary. And so, but then we thought about putting ourselves as a customer, like from where the shoes are being packaged, from the storage in their homes, from when it's being packed when you want to travel, to when you dispose the shoe. Nobody in the world is actually thinking about all of these phases of the customer's journey. And these are what we are putting in place. The reality is that is going to scale. That is part of our story. I need to keep growing. And so these are all of the things we embed in what we sell at SALUBATA. And this is really about our story. The reality is that we don't intend to sell all the shoes in the world, but then we believe we are going to take over the world because of the kind of strategies we are putting in place. Thanks.
Well, that's great. And that's interesting. You're thinking the sort of end-to-end supply chain like Alex, and I'm thinking somewhere there's a SPRK.Global of shoes that you two could do together. Julian, I know you have a lot of thoughts on how to grow your business, which at minimum is sort of a piece of software, but how do you see that growing and expanding?
Yeah, and it's amazing to hear these guys with their physical products and, trying to move around Mango. It's hilarious. Mango waste. So I'm obviously software, which is slightly different. We utilize 5G technology to do what we're doing. So we've looked at it in kind of 3 ways. We have corporate resellers. We have channel marketplaces, and then we have direct sales. And obviously we can be global. But the challenge when you're a small company is, what do you focus on? Are you focusing on being everywhere? Or are you focusing on, and also what part of the business you're focusing on? So we really doubled down on making sure our tech was the best. And that's where we spent the capital, that's where we spent the time, and we started in kind of direct sales as a normal business and founders-led sales. what we've ended up doing, which is great, is we have corporate resellers in some of our markets that actually sell SyncStage on our behalf, which is great. That means they act as the sales agent and we act as the technical customer support on that. So that's with some of our telco partners. The other area is we go to where application developers go to get APIs and stuff like that we're doing. So we're going to be announcing some of our channel partners soon in regards to that. I think it's important to understand, like, to deploy a thing takes 10 minutes, 10 to 30 minutes. It's one developer token, you put it in. So it's really, really quick to do that. And then finally, we've got direct sales, which we've been selling ourselves. So the way this business is actually going to scale is probably through that second vertical, which is going to be the channel marketplaces. But you also need the support in place to do that. So yeah, I mean, really amazing to hear the other stories. The way we focused on scale is making it extremely easy to deploy. What we call road to dopamine. How do you make it as quick as possible to get to the product, and then use regional sales in those particular markets, and then support, and then focus the business on technology and customer support, which is what we do internally. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So my final bonus question, and then we'll see if we have any others, is about XTC itself. It's obviously not a hugely complicated application, but it's a significant pitch in a busy startup's life. And I think each of you have not only applied to XTC, but other startup competitions. So there's clearly a strategy to be involved in these group programs. And I'm curious, and I'll just open this for any of you to comment. Alex mentioned that sort of brought him out of the closet. And I know a couple of you have gotten funding or collaborations, but tell me why that was a tactic to go to these, and also what you may have gotten out of XTC. I leave that open. Go ahead.
As you mentioned me, I can start. It's actually funny because I ran into Young Sun, who sits on the jury, co-founder of XTC, and this is 4 years back, and he was like, "Wow, kind of interesting what you guys have in mind." And you know, at that stage there was no company SPRK. It was just a project. Yeah, and we did some research. It was like, you guys should really apply. I was like, I don't even have a company yet, you know, it's project stage. And it was like, well, do apply. I was like, why would I apply? I was like, well, who else is applying? I said, like, well, the entire planet, everyone. I was like, okay, good luck. So we apply. I was like, well, what can we win? You know, any cash involved? I was like, no, but maybe fame. Yeah, let's see. And cut a long story short, so we did apply, and we really took it seriously. And we said, like, well, if they think, you know, we might be relevant, yeah, let's take it seriously. And so benefits we had, like, I mean, obviously XTC was huge for us, yeah, because especially on funding. Yeah, so as I said, I was my own angel for a couple of years to prepare the company, but eventually I knew I need external investors to, you know, invest into the platform in an ongoing fashion. Yeah, and so that was right after XTC. Yeah, summer of 2020, we did our first external round, raising a couple million from private investors, and so XTC not only, you know, helped us to build visibility, but also the key point I could make at the time, and even today still, is to say, like, you know, if the jury thinks what we do, SPRK, is relevant, yeah, and then local investors in Europe said, like, well, then, you know, I guess you're right, you know, it should be relevant, yeah. So and when XTC did the due diligence on SPRK, you know, they said, like, there's nobody out there with this two-step approach. Yeah, number one, it's about redistribution of food overstock. Yeah, marketplace approach, just like you, Julian. I'm a software developer. It's all about tech. But number two is, like, we really want to crack the problem and not just be, you know, the fire department for overstock. Yeah, and we said, like, it needs to be systemic. How can we make it systemic? Yeah, systemic. It will only be systemic if we achieve a degree of efficiency in the supply chain, which is, unmet today. Yeah. So, really the effort is to make the supply chain efficient. Yeah. And we're building a data highway for anybody to connect basically suppliers and folks on the demand side and so on. So that efficiency will drive down overproduction, will drive down food waste eventually. Yeah. And so that logic was kind of abstract for German investors. They were like, that sounds like a moonshot. I was like, it is a moonshot, yeah. But having won XTC, they said like, well, the jury must be right. And so I talked to Jerry Yang and Bill Tai and Tim Draper and Yang San, who became an investor in SPARK. And that really helped us. Yeah. And it also helped us because, it went on for 4 months or 5 months, video calls and coaching and stuff. And it really helped us to build like a global pitch professional, which resonates in Germany, but internationally also. And we still benefit. So I'm really grateful.
Oh, great. I don't know, Julian, do you want to tell us about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, so look, I think when you join these accelerators, there's a lot of them. And I think you've got to like figure out how it's going to accelerate your business, right? So there's ones where, I don't know, there's capital, but really it's expensive capital. So, there's better ways to actually raise. The cool ones are kind of the corporate ones. We've done a lot of that. And then the XTC one was pretty interesting because of its focus with Harman. We do stuff in audio. Harman's one of the best audio company on the planet. And it made real sense there. I think it's important to understand though, with an event like that, you open the door, you've got to walk through it and make see it to fruition, right? So we've ended up with a really strong relationship with Harman because of that. I think, XTC has a particular stature. Obviously we've done a lot of stuff at TechCrunch with you guys, and then relationships with certain telcos in the US through certain relationships there. So I think it's important, like, to look at it as an acceleration in terms of your corporate partners, an acceleration in terms of kinship for potential later rounds, which I think is what Alex was also referring to, which is super important. Yeah, and look at it in that way. But you are the one driving it. But I think most great entrepreneurs are kind of good at that. So, and these guys are as well. So.
Okay, Fela, what was your
Yeah, thanks a lot. I would say that STC for me was an amazing experience. I think it was one of the platforms that gave us the realization that we can actually go global, and that we started from Nigeria, and of course people in Nigeria like what we're doing, but then we intentionally built a kind of product that could be won anywhere in the world. And so what we've seen over time was we've seen so many brands build stores for Africans. And so maybe someone like you, John, you come to maybe in Lagos and you get, well, I like this colorful African attire, and you get it. And maybe the time you come again, maybe you might never come again, maybe in 5 years time or never. Or you can probably give that same clothes to maybe your sibling or maybe your family. And so there is no recurrence in sale. And so what we did was, so for our shoes, we did a lot of studies, and we have varieties of options for colors of what really appeals to people everywhere in the world. And so with that, we believe that we could grow bigger. And so with STC, that was the first realization that, oh, well, people like what we're doing. And so it was a motivation for us to keep driving what we're building. And so from there, we started thinking about, okay, so they asked, so why are your competitors? Say Nike and Adidas. Why will you say Nike and Adidas? Say, well, We're not exactly sure, but we know we're going to get there. But then over time, we started realizing that for us to really beat the competition, we need to release unique proposition, unique products, unique innovations, and we need to be constantly innovating. And so for us, that has really propelled us to a whole lot of platforms. In China, they're talking about us in about 40 countries now. And so for us, it's really, there was time we started thinking that, okay, we want to keep spending money on marketing. We need people to keep talking about it every week. And so SCC was one of the platforms that really pushed us. People started getting into us. And in addition to other platforms, we believe that for us, it's an avenue, all of these platforms are avenues for people to get to know more about us. The reality is that a lot of people have got to know about what we're doing via word of mouth. And we realize that this is even a better way to market our products. And so for us, SCC was a huge platform for really do a lot of things we're doing today.
Well, thank you. That's what we love to hear. And you even corrected me. I was still pegging you as local and had not appreciated just how much you had expanded with that. So that's the end of our hour. We've been very fortunate to have, as I said, from 3 different continents and 3 different domains, from 3 different cohorts of XTC, a great sample of the kinds of successful entrepreneurs that we like to find and publicize to the world. And Victoria, did you have any final comments for us?
Well, I want to thank all of our alumni founders for sharing your time and expertise and to see your journey. And it is not easy to build a company, to go from 0 to 1. And you have done that. So I appreciate hearing about, and particularly how we've been a small part of your journey supporting your success. I do have one question though from Fela. I think they're really, really great takeaways from everybody is you've been very active in the speaker circuit with United Nations, with World Economic Forum, a number of high-level conferences. And it's outstanding, and you've been very good at promoting your messaging on a global stage. How do you get invited to speak at these events? It's very practical advice. How do you break out of Africa and get on the world stages?
So I would say that, yeah, thanks for that. I would say that it starts with a dream. If you're able to dream big as a founder, you can just think, you can be in New York and just think about New York. You can be in the best countries and still not thinking big about what you're building. But I would say that for us, it was really about first thinking big. And additionally, it was really about making a lot of research about where the world is tending to in 5 years and 10 years. What communication, what innovations are going to be evolving. And we position ourselves exactly at the heart of those things. And so if a United Nations want to have a discussion, they will surely discuss something around what we're building. If a World Bank wants to, so it's really about it's just strategic positioning and thinking about the scale from the very beginning. And so for us, it's really those strategies we put in place. And we also intentionally build products that's user-friendly, something that people can keep talking about anywhere in the world. And so for us, that is what has been driving those communications.
Fantastic. And of course, your secret sauce. But it's amazing to see how you definitely have elevated the visibility of SALUBATA on the global stage. And I want to thank Julian. Amazing to see, because of XTC participation, now you have an engagement with Harman International, and we're happy to have been a small part of that facilitation. And Alex, we're so excited about SPRK.Global, and it was so compelling that our co-founder, Young Sung, invested, and look amazing to see how you've expanded, and look forward to seeing really wonderful things kind of coming out of your work and your team's work.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so that is it for the boot camp. And again, for people who are watching, if they want to look at this QR code, they can get the complete agenda. And in a few days, all of these will be up on the YouTube site, so you can rewatch them at your convenience. And with that, we thank you very much and adjourn the 2023 XTC Bootcamp.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Yes, great session. Really enjoyed it.